What is going on, guys? Well, unfortunately today we got some drama. None of this is breaking news. This actually came out last week just before we filmed our 31 on 31 debrief. Hopefully you guys checked that out, but like an hour before we went live, a lot of this started to pop off, and so I didn't have a chance to really get the facts, look at what all was going on, form an educated opinion. But there's been a lot of drama coming out about the production and the casting of Scream VII, which, if you're a Scream fan, you know was probably expected to be done for a premiere at least in early 2025. Probably not the case now. So I wanted to gather today and kind of talk about my thoughts on the news, the things that we know, the things that we can speculate about, and kind of give some of my thoughts on what Scream VII needs to do to fix all of this. And before I get started, I think it's very important to notate that, yes, there have been official news sources giving us all of this information, but as we all know, official news sources doesn't always mean that they're telling us the truth. So there's some people that are going to take these articles and what they say at their absolute face value as fact, and that's perfectly fine. If that's what you choose to believe, that is your right. If you're somebody that looks at these and immediately believes the opposite, you jump right into conspiracy theory and you jump right into the fake news angle, then that's also fine. I usually tend to try to gather what I know as far as habits of Hollywood, what I know as far as things that have historically happened in the past, and also what I know about what facts have been given to me, and come up with my own formed opinion. So obviously everything that I say here is going to be purely speculative. We might never know the full truth about what happened. We might never know what actually was said, what actually transpired between this studio and these two actresses, and anything else that happens in regards to the production of Scream VII. All we can do is form our own educated opinions as fans, and hopefully at the end of the day, we all learn the right lessons from this. Hollywood and the actors and actresses involved learn the right lessons from this, and maybe even at the end of it, we get a decent movie still, despite all this drama, but time will tell. But really quick before we dive into all of this dramatic nonsense, if you are somebody like me that loves to talk about movies and you want a platform and an avenue to be able to do that, check out the sponsor of today's video, Criticlist. If you're anything like me, one of your favorite things in the world is talking movies. Expressing your thoughts on what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, and getting information from other people like you about what their experience was, and comparing and contrasting notes with each other. But I acknowledge that not everybody takes it as far as I do, where I turned it into a full-time career where I spend literally every day talking about movies. And going along with that, there's plenty of people that just want to hear opinions of regular moviegoers, average Joes, regular people, not the pretentious critics.
The worst movie ever!
And that is where Criticlist comes into play, a free speech platform that is filled with real reviews by real people. Now, we all know other apps, one in particular that does very similar things where you are able to post your reviews, get aggregated scores, experience what other people think on particular movies and TV shows, but me personally, I've never really cared for them, hence why you don't see me on those platforms. But what Criticlist does that appeals much more to me than some of those other platforms is the fun and the style that they bring, as well as making this another form of social media interaction, not just an aggregate of review scores. For example, their Friends with Benefits option, which gives you a personalized aggregate score of people that you add to a list, so you have another point of reference besides the overall audience score. If you only want to know what your friends, family members, or chosen social media influencers think about a particular movie, use the Friends with Benefits option and get rid of all of the cluttered opinions that you are not concerned about. And they also have the water cooler, which is where you go beyond dropping your reviews and you can actually make posts and have discussions with other people discussing that movie or TV show. And visually, the biggest difference you're going to find with Criticlist is the retro 80s and 90s style with customizable profiles, all using artwork created by indie artists all over the world. And one of my favorite elements that makes Criticlist stand out is their achievement badges, which you earn more the more that you use the app. For example, when I dropped my first review, I got an achievement badge called "Like Warm Apple Pie." If you know, you know. And something that's going to be a really appealing option for a lot of you family people out there, like parents, is that you are able to rate the overall themes of movies and TV shows, like whether it's family friendly, if there's nudity or violence. And for those that are concerned about this, there is also an option to notate whether the media has a political bias, left, right, or center. So if you enjoy talking about movies and TV shows and meeting other people with like interests or even different interests, definitely check out Criticlist, the entertainment reviewing app for the people, by the people. And thank you so much to Criticlist for sponsoring today's video. All right, so in regards to all of this Scream VII drama, so last week, I believe on the 21st, there was a news article that dropped. I think Variety or Hollywood Reporter was one of the first people to drop it in regards to Melissa Barrera, the person who plays Sam Carpenter in the last two Scream films, essentially the lead of the new Scream films, was fired. And it was notated as the reason that she was fired is because of some social media posts that she had been making in regards to the Israel and Palestine conflict going on right now, a very hot button issue, a very devastating topic for everybody, whether you're involved or not. It's tragic. There's nothing else to say about it. And they went even further later on and basically categorized her comments as anti-Semitic. And that was the reason that we were given for why she was very unceremoniously removed from this movie and fired. And I've waited, I've searched through the rubble, I have tried to look at all social media posts that she has made, and I've even tried to wait to see if some things were going to be unearthed. Maybe she made some posts and deleted them, and they were not publicly available. It's a unique situation because usually when we have a scenario where an actor or director or writer, whoever, is fired suddenly from a movie's production or from a studio, typically the public have already been aware of what's been going on and they've already gone through the court of public opinion, and that's what usually forces the studio to make a decision to appease the hungry dogs out there picketing on Twitter. But this was not that situation. This was not a James Gunn situation where somebody unearthed something that they said and all of a sudden it was getting shared and retweeted everywhere and then the studio was forced to make a comment. This was something where the announcement of her firing was the first that pretty much anybody had heard of this situation. And I'm here to tell you, unless something else gets unearthed that she said, nothing that she has posted, in my own personal opinion, is wrong, is inflammatory, is worthy of being fired, and certainly is not anti-Semitic. I'm not going to read the post that she made because there's a number of them and they're very wordy, but essentially what all of her posts have boiled down to is that we need to get this conflict solved and people need to stop dying. It's essentially calling for a ceasefire, saying people need to stop being killed. No matter what side of the conflict you land on, I think most people with a rational brain would agree with that. And I've seen a lot of people's response. This hasn't really been one that has drawn up a lot of controversy in the sense to where you have people taking sides and saying, she was right because she sided with this person or she was wrong because she sided with this person. Pretty much the most negative comments that I've seen in regards to her making these statements that led to her firing is people saying that this is one of the reasons why celebrities, directors, writers, actors should stay out of political things and should not express their opinions. And, I have never been somebody that supports the notion that actors should just shut their mouths. Now, I do understand that there are some times where there's certain people in the limelight, there's certain people from Hollywood that talk a bit too much and alienate their audience, and some of them go too far and absolutely turn off people that were fans. I don't think this is one of those situations at all, but the notion that if you're famous, you should shut your mouth, that nobody wants to hear your opinions, never really been in favor of that mindset. To me, if you have a platform and you choose to use it to express your opinion, that is what everybody does with their platform. I mean, the irony of going on Twitter and telling an actor that they should shut their mouth while you are broadcasting to the world your thoughts on the situation is a bit rich to me. So this is one of them situations that I don't think that even that very minuscule criticism, I don't really think applies. And it's a well-known fact that there are multitudes of people in Hollywood that are still working in Hollywood, that did not lose their jobs, that were not fired from anything, that are continuing to get opportunities every single day, that have done significantly worse things than posting for a ceasefire. Now, the other side of that is that Spyglass, the studio that is holding the rights of Scream, the ones that fired Melissa, they're completely within their right to fire any of their actors or writers or directors for any reason that they want. That's the beauty of free speech. You're allowed to say whatever the fuck you want as long as you don't harm other people, and everybody's allowed to respond however the fuck they want. So whether or not I agree with her firing, whether or not we all think it's ridiculous, whether or not we all think that Spyglass is absolutely in the wrong here, doesn't really matter because they can do whatever the hell they want. But now, us as the fans can now have our retaliation as far as how we decide to view Scream 7 and how we decide to view anything else that Spyglass produces. And I think Melissa's going to come out of this just fine, because while it's an absolute shame to lose her as the lead of these movies for many different reasons, I like her as this character, and I think this character, as well as Jenna Ortega, who we're going to talk about in a second, their characters are in the middle of an arc. You know, I've seen some people say, oh, well, you know, Scream 6 was a satisfying end anyway. I wouldn't quite agree with that. I think if you have to make that an ending, I guess it's okay, but that's certainly was not planned to be the ending. But she's going to come out of this just fine, because there's been overwhelming support for that woman. And I think she gained like 1.5 million Instagram followers or something like that over the weekend after all of this. Maybe I'm inflating that number, but it was a shitload. And so this is one of those situations where you don't see too many people siding with Spyglass. Now, what made this entire thing all the more interesting is I don't even think it was 24 hours later we then got the announcement through very credible trades that Jenna Ortega has dropped out of Scream 7 because of scheduling conflicts. Now, apparently she, pre all of the strikes, was already kind of discussing that with them, that her shooting schedule for Scream 7 was going to conflict with her shooting schedule for Wednesday Season 2. Now, from what I know about Hollywood scheduling and the way that these things are worked out, if they really wanted to have Jenna Ortega in this movie, and if she really wanted to be a part of Scream 7, they could have figured out a way to figure that out. They could have pushed production a month or two. They could have figured it out if it was really a priority. Whether or not it was absolutely not a priority for Spyglass or not at this point, there's a lot of speculation that, you know, people have said that they probably already decided they want to go in a different direction, rather than just saying that and saying that, oh, well, you know, the stars of Scream 5 and 6 have completed their contracts and we're going in another direction. They decided to lambast Melissa Barrera publicly and give this very canned response for why Jenna Ortega is not there. And again, we could speculate all day long. We'll never know the truth about that. But I tend to think that Jenna Ortega probably did have scheduling conflicts. All of that is probably true. And she was discussing that with them pre the writer and actor strike. But once they fired Melissa Barrera, and especially in the way that they did, I'm sure that pretty much sealed the deal for her. And she said, yeah, I'm not going to bother trying to work anything out with this production company and Spyglass and the shooting schedule of Scream 7. I'm out. So as of now, the two leads, the co-leads of Scream 5 and Scream 6 are completely out of Scream 7. Still nothing in regards to the other two actors from the core four, the twins. I don't imagine they're going to stick around, but then again, I really don't know. If Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera's contracts were only for 2 movies, I have extreme doubts that other actors in the franchise had contracts for more than 2 movies. But then again, we might find out more as things go on. So as of right now, it seems like Scream 5 and Scream 6 are the end of this era of Scream, and now Scream 7 is up in shambles, and they're doing a complete creative reboot. Now, I was really excited at the news that Christopher Landon was going to be the director of Scream 7. He's the guy that brought us the 2 Happy Death Day movies. He brought us Freaky. I like all of his movies so far. I like his style. I like his sense of humor. And I think that his style would actually translate really well to Scream and be something really unique and fresh, as long as he didn't go too comedic, which I had every faith that he would be able to strike that balance really well. And, you know, his response on Twitter to this whole thing wasn't the best. He kind of just, more or less, he was like, this wasn't my decision, so stop yelling at me, rather than showing any support or any, you know, anything towards Melissa. And, you know, it's no surprise that he eventually had to delete that tweet, because people were not really, not very favorable of that as a response, especially coming from a guy who, like a week or 2 previous to this, was essentially calling for all creatives to just boycott working with WB after it was announced that they were going to be canning the Coyote and Acme movie, which has since gotten, you know, pushed over to another studio, which is great. You know, that same energy would have been nice for this. Whether or not he can make a direct statement in support of Melissa and against the studio, regardless, just basically saying, leave me alone, this wasn't my thing, that was a pretty lame response. So that was disappointing, but nonetheless, when people are part of the Hollywood machine, they look out for themselves. That's a very dog, eat, we eat each other type of scenario. As much as Hollywood people like to be on their pedestal and tell all the rest of us that they're the moral police for the world, they will eat each other in a moment's notice. But Spyglass essentially has announced since then that they're going to be doing a complete creative reboot of Scream VII. So whatever the idea was, if there even was a concrete idea, is now scrapped. It's now in the trash, and they are going from square one, writing a whole new script, a whole new creative direction. And I don't know if that was their choice before they fired Melissa and, Jenna had her scheduling conflict solidified. I don't know if this is just a very quick pivot after the past week of news. Again, we'll never know. But the first thing that they announce, which is the most predictable thing for them to say, is that, we're doing a creative reboot, and on the top of our list is to get Neve Campbell back and Patrick Dempsey, who was just in Thanksgiving a little over a week ago, who canonically in this series is Neve Campbell's husband. We haven't seen him since Scream 3, but they mention it in Scream 5 that she's married to him and they have kids. Now, this is where things get a little tricky, because on one hand, are fans going to be happy that Neve Campbell is coming back? I'm sure most of them would. That was one of the big controversies of Scream 6, which, again, is another kind of a chink in the armor of Spyglass, is the way that they treated Neve and the way that whole thing was aired out publicly, to where essentially she said that it was a pay dispute. They didn't want to pay her what she thought she was worth, and so she walked away from the project. And I don't know what size role they ever had planned for her. Scream 6, as is, didn't seem like there was much room for any of the OG characters, even Courtney Cox, who was in the movie. But nonetheless, the big narrative surrounding that movie when it was in production was, this is the first Scream movie that's not going to have Sydney, and it's because they didn't want to pay her. The lead of this series, they didn't want to pay her. So fans certainly felt a certain way about that. So are fans going to be excited that potentially Neve Campbell is going to come back to lead Scream yet again with Scream 7? I think it's going to split people, because while the surface value appeal of having Sydney back is definitely going to perk a lot of Scream fans up, especially the ones that missed her in Scream 6, I think the context of why she is going to be back in this franchise for Scream 7 is going to taint that for a lot of people, if she even decides to come back. Because there's absolutely the possibility that because of the way she was treated with Scream 6 and the way that she's seen that they're treating Melissa, she might tell them to go fuck themselves, and she has no interest in working with Spyglass. That's very possible. But if she decides to come back, and I would not fault her whatsoever if she decides to come back, the situation definitely makes that something to where it's not easily exciting for me. Because on one hand, if they said, Scream 6, we had a story we wanted to tell, there wasn't really room for Neve, we had some pay disputes or whatever, but we want to right that wrong, we want to pay her what she's worth, we want to make her a lead again, we want to have Sydney come back for one final movie, whatever they wanted to do to spin it, that could have been interesting and exciting. But because it seems like this is just a reactionary choice of, oh, fuck, now the fans are mad at us, so I guess we'll pay you, Neve, come on back now, that isn't very appealing to fans, and I don't even know if it's going to be very appealing to Neve. Having Patrick Dempsey come back, I could take or leave that. I love Patrick Dempsey. I always have, ever since the 80s. I think he was very good in Scream 3. I think he was very good in Thanksgiving, and I assume he would be very good in Scream 7, but he's not a character that's ever really been that important to me. So I could take or leave that one. That also just kind of felt like a reactionary, like, oh, you guys just saw him last week, we want him back too. So what do they need to do in Scream 7? I think, honestly, they need to pump the brakes for a while. I don't think the best thing for this movie is going to be to slam the gas pedal to the floor and try to rush this thing into a rewrite phase and try to get people in front of cameras by the end of this year to get the movie out in 2025. I don't think that's going to be a good idea. As quickly as they can shoot a Scream movie, I mean, we had a year turnaround from 5 to 6. I just don't think that the rushing it out with the way that fans feel about what's going on right now is going to be the best option. So I think that they should pump the brakes for a bit, maybe let all of 2024 be kind of them repairing things and figuring out the best direction to go. And who knows, maybe they can even repair things with Melissa Barrera, whether she would come back or not. That's completely up to her. But it's very hard to get excited for the 7th movie if you're a fan of the first era of Scream, the first 4 movies, or if you're a fan of this newer era of Scream. and if you're a fan of both, because they have basically just assassinated the character arcs and the direction that we have been building for the past 2 movies, which to me was a direction, despite my problems with Scream 6's ending, that I really liked. I like these new characters. I like this new direction. And despite loving Neve Campbell and Sidney Prescott, I think that they did a really good job at solidifying these new characters and set them up to where they could very much carry this franchise for another couple of movies. So if you're a fan of that, that's gone. And if you're a fan of Neve Campbell and Sidney, them trying to just pivot and have a reactionary decision to bring her back when most fans would say she never should have been considered to be out of these movies in the first place is not going to win too many people either. And I've seen some people suggest even that they should do some gigantic swing, like bringing Matthew Lillard back as Stu, which is something that fans have speculated for a very long time. And there was a lot of things very subtly put into Scream 6 that I felt was very obviously setting up that direction so that maybe one day they could go that way, and putting some little building blocks there. If they decided to do that just as a marketing ploy to get all the Scream fans on board, like here's that big twist that you've been asking for and we're finally going to do it, again, because it's a reactionary decision, I think that would absolutely decimate the excitement and the speculation that fans have had regarding his return for years. Like, it's one thing if that was always the plan and we finally get that reveal in what would have been the original idea for Scream 7. That's one thing. But to then just kind of be backed into a corner and say, we got to do something crazy to get everybody on our side, so I guess we'll do this, that to me would taint the entire thing. So I don't know. The whole thing is a mess. That's all I can say. You know, I'm a very casual, here lately I've been a little bit more of a fan of Scream, but I've always been a casual fan of Scream. And this definitely hurts me as a fan and makes it to where I don't really know how to feel about anything. I don't know what would excite me. I don't know what would set off my alarm bells, but I'm curious what you guys think. If you're a huge Scream fan, what is your thoughts on this situation? Where do you want to see the Scream franchise go? Is there anything that Spyglass can do to win you back over to Scream 7, or is the only option for you for them to just give the rights to somebody else? I have a hard time believing that most fans would stick to that. I know a lot of people are calling for boycott, saying they won't support anything Spyglass does. They won't watch Scream 7. Most people that say that don't actually follow through with it. Some do. But let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think about this Scream 7 drama? Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release movie reviews. I'm also going to put my review series for Scream up here. If you're a fan of that franchise, you can check out my thoughts on all of the movies. Also, like, share, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. Please, as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.